Is that what we're calling this episode? Hermetic hermeneutics?
No.
We should, dude. That's a sweet title.
It is a sweet title.
It's not too late.
It's too late.
It's too late.
It's too late.
Now it's too late.
It's not. Oh, well.
And he's gone.
Just for the record, YouTube family, Adam named this episode, "What Can We Learn from Hermits?" And I suggested Hermetic hermeneutics. That would have been a way better title. You know what? Thumbs up this episode if you agree with me.
If we get more than 10 thumbs up, I would be impressed.
You know what? I hope we do. I hope we get 10,000.
All right.
Of course I hope that.
Here we go.
We're on the Lord's team, the winning side, so raise your glass.
Welcome to the Catholic Command Show. We're on the Lord's team, the winning side, so raise your glass. The gang is all here.
Sorry.
It's okay. Jimbo Baggins, El Producer Juan Posada. Everybody is doing well. I hope. I haven't actually really talked to.
I'm doing well.
Good. Adam in here with David Niles. Man, it is. Here you go, Juan. I'm gonna let you pour yours.
I got you, bro.
It's good to be back in studio. It's good to be together. It's good to be together. A lot of things have been going on in the world in general, and then specifically in the Tulsa world, and then specifically even in our own families. But it's good to be together. We had a crazy ice storm, which has been wild.
Yeah, man. It's been freezing.
Very, very cold. Yes. So a couple of things that we need to talk about. One being that our fantasy football team, our league, has ended, and the winner is who was it? Is Jerusalem Giants? Is that who it was? Yes, the Jerusalem Giants. No, yes, Jerusalem Giants. So congratulations to them. Every year we have a fantasy football league.
The thing is,
for patrons,
it's hard to look up who that even is.
Yeah.
Like,
just reach out to us.
Let us know. Hey,
we want to know who the Jerusalem Giants.
Yeah, like email us, because I can look it up, but all I see are first names and like.
So every year, for fantasy football, we have a Patreon league. So if you're a patron of the Catholic Man Show, which by the way you should try to go.
And you got to be a man to compete. I mean, like
it's 18 to 20 person league.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a lot.
It's tough. Like you have to be on your chops, your fantasy chops.
Mm-hmm. But it's a lot of fun. I of course beat Dave, which no one was keeping record, but I did.
You know, my manager rating is like way higher than yours.
Yes, I did know that.
Okay. Yeah, just curious if you knew that.
I did. Also,
I'm glad you know that.
Also, we had a good friend who went to Ireland with us this last year on our pilgrimage, Christian Brewer, and he and his wife went with us, and they celebrated their 20th anniversary. And when they got back, a few weeks later, Christian tragically passed away in a car accident.
Yeah.
And today is his 1 year.
1 year anniversary
of his death.
Yeah.
And so we ask in your charity to please keep him in your prayers, and then also his family, as you know, they probably need your love and support as well. So
absolutely. You know, so I messaged. We have a group me.
Mm-hmm.
Group should we call it? I don't know. But we set that up on the pilgrimage just so we had a way of communicating with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so I messaged somebody. I messaged the group just as a reminder, like, hey, today's the anniversary of Christian's death. Please pray for his soul and remember his family. And one of the people responded right away saying, "I pray for him at every Mass." And it just made me so thankful for that person, Terry, who's doing that. And I just thought it was just such a blessing, and it really presented the gift of pilgrimage to me right there, because these are two people, Christian and Terry. They didn't know each other. They're not from even the same part of the country, and in the grand scheme of things, we all spent very little time together. You know, it was about 10 days, which is, 10 days is a good amount of time, but it's not like we've known each other for years and, but there's just something about traveling together on pilgrimage. It's just a bonding thing.
Absolutely.
And so much so for Terry that she's been praying for him at every single Mass. Like, I just thought that was so great.
I agree. Yeah, it's one of the beautiful things about going on a pilgrimage.
Yeah.
So, what are we drinking tonight, Dave?
Well, you brought this, but it's Ardbeg Anamorphic. I don't know much about it other than the one sip I had, which was enlightening.
Yeah, it's a committee release. It's 2023 committee release. It has like here's what it says: a multi-dimensional dram that morphs between 4 elements: sweet, smoky, herbal, and spicy, all seamlessly merging in a mesmerizing taste experience. As enigmas wrapped up together, this Ardbeg is a whole new level.
I think it's fantastic. I know that's going to come as just a huge
shock
shock to
to
everybody that I think Ardbeg is delicious. But also I think Ardbeg, as far as distillers go, I think that what they do better than anybody is put out
Experiments?
experimental whiskey? Sort of experimental ones, but that are really good. And some of them aren't even experimental, like Cordy Vrecken is a really good one. Ugadile is another really good one. And that are very different from each other, but still very clearly Ardbeg. When you try them, it's like, yes. Sort of like when you see a family and you see all these kids, and you can tell, oh yeah, all those kids, they're definitely all related.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about all of the Ardbeg releases. It's like clearly all the Ardbeg family, which I appreciate because I really, really like Ardbeg, and it's like them staying true to like who they are, but they're also still very different.
Yeah.
Which there's a lot of other distillers who have kind of, a variety of things, but the variety they don't vary as much, So I just appreciate Ardbeg as a distillery.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really delicious. We're on the Lord's team.
The winning side.
So raise your glass.
Cheers to Jesus.
Cheers. Jim, what do you think on the yummy scale there?
David's overselling it. It's like 3.9.
Oh, 3.9.
David's overselling it, 3.9.
Different strokes, I guess.
Well, but we also know that Jim doesn't really like smoky, peaty whiskey, so.
What did we have last week that was a 4.97 or something?
That was your
that was
whiskey.
the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society,
Yeah. So, what else going on? The
we got
the pigs are
pigs. Still no piglets.
no piglets yet. Okay.
No piglets yet. It doesn't seem to me like it's still days away. That's kind of how I feel.
Okay.
But it's still anticipating. I'm honestly glad they haven't been born yet because we've had single-digit temperatures.
Right.
And that was going to be really complicated to keep a piglet nice and warm when it's 7 degrees outside, So now we have warmer weather coming. Hopefully, much better time
to have one
for some pigs to have some babies. In other news, we mentioned this last week, but my daughter Mary has officially been confirmed and First Communion.
Mm-hmm. She looked beautiful in her Holy Communion, or First Communion dress, and
it's really
it was
great.
Awesome.
It's really
beautiful.
great.
Yeah, and my nephew got baptized the same day.
All right.
So,
when we were at this confirmation, so it was a confirmation, First Communion for the homeschooling group, and it's in the restored order, which means that confirmation comes before First Communion, which is actually the original order of the sacraments. There are the 3 sacraments of initiation, baptism, confirmation, and First Holy Communion. The reason confirmation comes before Holy Communion is that the reception of Holy Communion is now like the fullness of initiation. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with doing confirmation later from a sacrament. It's not like, oh, it's bad to do it later. I think you shouldn't. I think we shouldn't be doing confirmation. This is my personal opinion later in life. But I was looking at these.
I'm in that camp as well.
Yes,
I'm like, get them the grace as soon as possible.
Totally. That's what I think.
Preferably before puberty.
Yes. And I was watching these kids, who are mostly like 7, 8, 9. There were a couple that were maybe a little older than that. But the eagerness and the receptivity that they had towards the sacrament. And then you just contrast that with the high school groups who are there to receive the sacrament of confirmation, where in the group, maybe 1 or 2 is actually excited about the sacrament, and the rest just could not give a flip about, it's like, Mom said I had to, so I'm doing it. And I actually know high school kids who's like, I'm getting confirmed so I can stop going to mass, because that's
tragic.
That's how they feel about it. It's like, oh, I'm an adult now. I can finally make my own decisions. This is not, I just think you look at it and say, is this working? To me, it's clearly not a good setup for the sacraments. So anyway, big fan also of the restored order.
Yes.
Not to mention it puts the sacraments in the correct order of baptism, confirmation, and then First Holy Communion.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things in the church that are going back in certain things, where we realized this isn't working. We should go back.
Yeah.
That's not a liturgical stance. I'm just saying, like, there's just things that we've done.
In practice, we say, hey, this needs to be changed. Let's go back and do it. We thought this was going to be better. It hasn't been, so let's do it different.
Yeah. So when we get back, we're going to talk about something that I've always found, like, puzzling, which are hermits.
Yes.
Like why and what's the purpose?
Are we going to be talking about hermetical hermeneutics?
Maybe.
It's a great title. Jim, how dare you say this is a 3.7? How dare you?
He said 3.9.
A 3.9.
I like that.
So my son,
Can I have the tobacco?
he's been saying how dare you, stuff like that. Like, how dare you refill my water? Or like, he says it, he doesn't say it ever in a like disrespectful way. It's just always just.
Please regard me.
He also calls Lady Pamela babe sometimes. Which is just so funny. Like
It's hard to correct.
I can't even get mad. She thinks it's hilarious.
Yeah.
Everybody I think it's hilarious. Like,
It's hard to correct whenever kids do
it's
something.
almost like I almost want to encourage him to do it more, just because when he's at the table, it's like, hey babe, pass me the green beans. It's just hilarious. Because he doesn't know. He just hears me say, hey babe,
Right.
pass me the green beans. And
Right.
so he's like, hey babe,
Yeah.
why don't you pass me them green beans?
That's great.
Right?
It is funny.
Because it's just a short window in time.
Mm-hmm.
It's like where, and if he does it, like here shortly, if he continues doing it, it won't be innocent and hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I'm ready. Welcome back to the Catholic Man Show. I'm David Niles. I forgot it was my turn to bring us in.
We've only been doing it for 7 years.
Yeah. Anyway, we're going to be talking about hermits today.
Yeah.
Are they pointless? Do they still exist?
Yeah.
Because you've got levels. I mean, the hermits. I actually think hermits, and you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe
Can't wait to correct you.
hermits predate even like monks and religious, like the religious orders. People were going out into the desert.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it depends.
There
on what
may
you
have
mean.
been some like
It depends on what you mean, because there's even some biblical references of like hermits.
I mean, I think about
So it just depends on what you mean by that. But let's
like Saint Anthony, who is the
Right.
like monastic father of sort of like the religious movement
Mhm.
in the East, who was actually before Saint Benedict.
right.
He actually was a hermit before. I'm sure there were some orders. I don't know.
Yeah. So I've always had this question about like why why is it that like hermits exist, right? Because it just seems like that we're all called for communion, like we need one another. I don't understand why some people should be going out into the desert and living their life kind of on their own. Now, obviously, there's some qualifications there because hermits, even while living out in the desert, still go back in, right? Typically weekly, like for Sunday Mass, with the community. But it still just like kind of almost rubbed me the wrong way. I just didn't feel just didn't seem like it was fitting.
Right, because you're made for fraternity.
community, yeah.
Right. One of the first things God says about man is it's not good for man to be
alone. Right.
And here you are.
Going out and
It
being
seems
alone.
like you're rejecting part of your nature almost,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, so-
I share some of those questions.
Yeah, and so I read this book recently, which is a great Lenten read if you're looking for one. It's called A Christian Asceticism. It's by Anselm Stolz.
Not Saint Anselm.
No, Anselm Stolz. He was a I forget. So the professor of systematic theology in Rome, in the early 1900s to 1942. But it's a great book. It's called Christian Asceticism. It's put out by Aruka Press. Is that how you say it? Aruka Press?
Sure.
Yeah. Great. It's a great read, and I'm pulling mainly from this book. But before we talk about like exactly what hermits are, I think we should talk about the ascetic life,
Okay.
because
Very good.
because hermits is just an extension of like the ascetic life. It's just almost like an extreme of the ascetic life.
Okay.
And so what do we mean by that, right? What do we mean by ascetics?
Mhm.
Like ascetic practices, and that's really like self-denial.
Mhm.
It's fasting, abstinence. It's like suppressing your will,
Yeah.
like and denying yourself certain pleasures for a greater
Yeah,
good.
it's like a life of penance, or the practice of penitential practices would be an ascetic life.
Right, and so an ascetic really just seeks God, right? This is the whole purpose of the ascetic life, is
By
to seek
rejecting
God.
the world.
Right. It's a search for its original homeland that was lost in sin by Adam. Right, and so like imagine back in with the Garden of Eden, Adam like heard God in the garden, right? Like he knew God's presence. He talked to God, right? And so, but because of sin, he no longer has that luxury, right? And so, and then self desires, pleasures, things of this world became attractive and actually kind of drowned out the voice of God.
Uh-huh.
So really, it's this whole idea of like just coming back to the Garden of Eden before sin, right?
Right.
Or going back to like what we're made for, namely heaven.
An attempt to put priorities in the right place. Order my will towards the ultimate good, instead of being distracted towards the lower goods of the world. Things that are still good, but not the ultimate good.
Right.
But which are so tempting all the time. I think we as moderns just don't realize how steeped we are in the modern world. Okay, it's like, does the fish know he's in the water? It's difficult for us to really, really have an appreciation for the comforts, luxuries, that we just take for granted all the time.
Now, obviously, this can go the wrong way because we're not Stoics, right? So we're not doing it just
Right.
for its own sake,
Right.
So they talk about it in the book Christian Asceticism. It says the ascetic life leads to contemplation, and all the ascetic practices is secondary to that goal. So contemplation leads to union with God and draws us towards this divinization.
Mm-hmm.
So like the goal is not the asceticism for itself. The
Which,
goal
which is that's what the Stoics would.
that would say
That's what they would say. Is it's just about suppression.
right. But the goal is I must decrease so that he may increase.
Mm-hmm.
To lead into this this life of contemplation, to contemplate our Creator.
Yeah.
And so that and the means to that end is a lot of times ascetic practices.
Sure.
So Aquinas talks about this idea because, like, once we're in heaven, we're in a perfect state. Like, this is what we're made for. We're made to be in heaven. We're made to be with God. We're made to contemplate God. We're made to rest in Him for all of eternity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he talks about how one can reach perfection in two routes.
Okay.
Either by divine grace alone, or they may gain it by the exercise of virtue.
Okay.
So there may be a way in which,
or a combination.
or combinate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because even by gaining it by the exercise of virtue, it's just a cooperation with His grace.
Mhm.
So either God can go probably like an abnormal route, which would be like just through His divine grace, make you perfect.
Yeah.
One be an immaculate conception, right?
Sure.
That's maybe an example of that. Like that's not a
Par excellence. Yeah.
But the other way is really the cooperate, and probably the normal practice is the cooperation and exercise of virtue.
And there are other examples. Some of the saints have had St. Thomas Aquinas had this experience where basically God told him, you will no longer struggle with temptations of chastity.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just obviously he was a very virtuous man.
Right.
But this was just simply like an overwhelming grace that God gave to him.
Based on his virtue, though, that he...
I mean, he was certainly virtuous, but it wasn't it's not like his virtue had, like, merited this or,
Maybe.
It was, okay.
I mean, he ran the prostitute out.
He did, like, yes, running this prostitute out of this tower he was staying in, but still, to never have a temptation against chastity for the rest of your life is just simply a grace that's overpowering that lower part of your nature.
Right. And so he's talking about, so if we're talking about perfection, we're talking about leading ourselves, leading to perfection and our end.
Mm-hmm.
Social life is therefore necessary to exercise this perfection, right? Because we're not made to be alone.
Right.
That the friendships in this life prepare us for the friendship that we'll have with Christ in the next, right? So our friendship hopefully is a virtuous friendship founded on Jesus Christ that brings us that ascends us towards our Heavenly Father. Juan creates, with his friendship, the three of us is a unique relationship that we wouldn't have without Juan. Like, Juan brings certain things into the friendship that you and I would not have by ourselves that, like, create a new, greater, deeper understanding of God, right?
Cheers, Juan.
Way to go, Juan.
Cheers.
But he says, so he's talking about, we're needed in a social life for perfection. But he says solitude, on the other hand, is suitable for those who are already perfect. So
Wow,
so he's talking. So he says, once you are, and I think what he means by perfect here is that you no longer there's a couple things. You're no longer ordered with your passions. Like, your passions aren't overcoming your will. You're no longer tempted by the world, and you don't desire the things of this world.
Let me ask you a question here, and
Okay.
if I'm jumping ahead, just let me know.
Okay.
Does he talk about hermit, the state of being a hermit, as like a subset of religious life, or does he kind of present this as, regardless of what your vocation is, this is still an option?
So I don't know if Aquinas talks about that, but Anselm Stoll does talk about it.
That's what I mean.
Okay.
Anselm.
So he does talk about how it's typically.
This is Aquinas. The stuff you've just been reading, this is all from Aquinas.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
You said that, I'm sure, but
Yes, I did.
I missed it.
But he does talk about how hermits are monks. Yes.
Because when you read the rule of Saint, but the reason I asked that is because Saint Benedict certainly seems to me to think that it is a sort of a subset of the monk.
Okay, so hold on. Let's pause there because
Okay.
What I want to
You want to come back to that?
Yeah,
Okay.
look, because basically what I'm trying to say is, okay, so we're called to perfection. We need one another to grow in holiness.
Mm-hmm.
But once we have reached a level of holiness that we no longer need necessarily one another, that solitude is sufficient and actually fitting in the state of perfection.
Right.
Okay, but engaging in the solitude without first being formed properly is very dangerous. Obviously, this is what
Right.
Aquinas talks about. And those who've already reached perfection don't need other people's help. So this makes sense.
Right.
Like those in heaven, we don't have to pray for their soul. Like the saints, we don't pray for their souls
Because they don't need it.
They don't need it. They're already
Right.
perfected.
Right. And it's still, and this is still true of the hermit, that we are all made to make of ourselves a gift to one another. Okay? And once you've achieved this level of perfection, like what we're talking about here, you can now do that in solitude. You're still making yourself a gift
Right.
to the community through your contemplative life.
Right. So that's what we're going to actually talk about. I wanted to set this up to actually then talk about the hermit life.
Okay.
And then what we can learn from it, and then how we're actually all called, regardless of your vocation, to live an ascetic life.
Very good.
I'm gonna turn off the thing really quick.
Okay.
You're going to what?
Turn it off.
I can pick it up sometimes.
Well,
Okay.
it's just like
I think, well, just leave it. I think you should leave it on.
Okay.
it's fine.
So it just turns on for a second most of the time.
So the goal here was like, okay, we're all called to perfection. Once you reach perfection, then you actually can't be in solitude, but you shouldn't do that unless you are in the state of perfection, because that could be very dangerous.
Uh-huh.
And then, but once you are in the state of perfection and you're into solitude, you actually don't need one another, so to speak, to achieve this level of holiness.
Mm-hmm.
So that sets up the foundation for going into like, okay, well, what is the purpose of the hermit?
Okay.
That's what I was hoping. I maybe not articulated that very well, but that's what I was hoping to achieve there.
Okay.
Welcome back to the Catholic Man Show. If you're just tuning in on Catholic Radio, we're talking about perfection, solitude, friendship, and how that leads into hermits, and what their purpose is, and then the ascetic life, and how, and then eventually what we're going to talk about is how we are all called, regardless of your vocation, to the ascetic life.
I have another question about before we move on,
Okay.
because we just laid out the framework that, you know, once you achieve this certain level of perfection, you no longer need that like level of fraternity, the accountability, you know, to pursue virtue.
Mhm.
You're now able to, because of the mastery over your own passions,
Mm-hmm.
pursue that virtue independently.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, and
Actually, never independently, but
thank you, that's a good caveat, but in solitude.
yes.
My question is, do any of the authors talk about if you've achieved that level of perfection in your spiritual life, is it actually a risk not to pursue solitude at that point? I'm
Well,
just thinking that, okay,
so there are
now through those through your fraternity,
Mm-hmm.
you might actually just continue to encounter more it might be more dangerous for you to persist in the world, so to speak, right? Just because
Yeah. So
do
he talks.
they talk about
Yeah.
that?
So he talks about how actually not even in the states of perfection, like if you are living in this state of perfection, you are still. That does not mean you're necessarily called to a hermit life.
Perfect.
So really, like living the Christian life, right? We're all like, in order to become holy, we can't leave the cross or mortification out of the picture. Like, right? The truly Christian life without trials and sufferings is inconceivable.
Right.
Right. So we're all going to suffer in this life. And so it's a matter of like what we do with that suffering,
Mm-hmm.
and how we interpret that suffering, and how we are able to either cooperate or use that suffering to a good end or to a bad end.
Mm-hmm.
And so this process of divinization that we were talking about, how like that contemplation leads to this unity with God, which is this theosis type of divinization, really talks about, this is not a shocker to probably anybody who is a Catholic, but the means to this is fasting, prayer, and reading of Holy Scripture. Like, this is the way in which you're called to holiness, by fasting, by prayer, and by the study of Holy Scripture. Now, interestingly, here's where hermits come into play. Is what he says in here, is that it wasn't until the 4th and 5th century, when Christianity became legal, was there a need for hermits.
No kidding.
So when Christianity became legal, the ease of Christians, you're now able to, that's a good thing, right? That Christianity became legal, and so now more people
certainly
can practice the faith. But what also happens, what just naturally, is there's a secularization of the church.
Yeah.
Right? Because, and this is the political forces of what happens between the church and the world, right? Because like once it becomes like legal, then you have to encounter the world, and rulers in this world who are not perfect will end up compromising some things. Like, we're not, and so like
look at Ireland,
takes. Right?
That's the
look at
history
the
of Ireland.
U.S.
Yeah, the U.S. too.
So there's gives and takes. Like, right? These are a good thing, right? That it's legal, but it also now there's less stress on. There's comfort that in the Christian life.
Yeah.
And so they talk about how the church always needs martyrs, because the Church of Christ is essentially the Church of Martyrs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in times of peace, when the storm of persecution has passed, the church still has her martyrs, but they're not soaked in blood of the sands aren't soaked in blood, but rather without the blood of the shedding of blood, they're drawn to the world of outpouring grace through prayers and mortification. So there's different types of martyrs, not necessarily those who are dying, for the sake of the church, but they're giving up their life through prayer and mortification.
So you think that when it was illegal, you had it more like a by default hermit style, because you were already in hiding, right? You couldn't congregate in big numbers, so it's almost like it was a structure more like that, just not by the virtue of what they had to do to worship.
Yeah, I think there's some validity to that. I think that, again, it goes back to, you cannot, like, as a state of Christians, you cannot run away from the cross. If you're a Christian, you cannot run away from the cross. So the cross is going to look different for each time period. Mm-hmm. But I loved what he said there is that essentially, like, the church always needs martyrs, because the Church of Jesus is essentially the church of martyrs.
Yeah.
Because we're living our life in the manifestation of Christ, the Word made flesh, is the example, the true example of man. And what did he do? But he laid down his life for everybody. Mm-hmm. So they say, like, basically, in times of peace, the need for hermits increase. And in times of turmoil and trouble, the need for hermits decrease.
Yeah. Red versus white martyrdom.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that there's just a natural thing that takes place in the mind that you can see in other things. If you are presented with two products, one of them costs more than the other, you're going to put a greater, even if they're exactly the same, two watches, say they're exactly the same watch, but one watch just costs twice as much as the other. You are going to, in your mind, assign more value to the one that costs you more, rightly or wrongly. Okay, so I'm not saying this is a spiritual reality. This is just a natural reality in the perception of us. Okay, so if now we're buying into something, this idea of Christianity, and it's going to cost us everything, okay, then we're going to be able to appreciate the reality of what the Christian life means in a deeper and truer way. Whereas today, here in America, certainly, the cost of being Christian doesn't appear to be very high.
Right.
It hasn't changed. It still costs you everything.
Right.
To embrace the Christian faith the way it's, in the way that it is, right? But it doesn't seem like it.
Right.
And so
This is the importance of
it
Lent,
does. It
right?
has a way of cheapening it in our mind,
Right.
and I don't mean that the faith is cheap at all.
No.
But it's just a natural thing that takes place in our own perceptions.
Yeah, so there's a real spiritual warfare going on here, right? Whether or not you like feel like you're a guy who's like who can relate to spiritual warfare or not. Like the reality is there is a spiritual warfare. And so this is what the importance of also Lent is. Like, do you want to be the man who gave up chocolate for Lent? Or do you want to be the man who like subdued their passions for the greater good of their family?
Yeah.
Like, a priest recently, I was listening to his talk, and
Hashtag Exodus 90.
yes, a priest recently talked about how this Lent, he said, do something that you are not capable of doing without the Lord. Like, do something for Lent this year that you will fail for sure, without doubt, that you will fail this Lent without the help of God. And do that. Which I think is really
Bold.
bold,
Yeah.
right? So again, so there's a spiritual warfare happening, right? And the world is trying to take over, which, you know, with the prince of the world is the devil, but Christ has died, and you know, this whole world and conquered death, and so there's this whole war that's happening here on earth, right? And so when there's persecution in the church, that there's a natural the blood, the martyr, the seeds of the church, right? So there's this natural growth that happens in the church. When there's peace, then there's needed for other people who say, just like in a martyr sense, that they're giving up their life, but they're going to give up their life in prayer and mortification for the sake and sanctity of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So these people who have reached this state of perfection, and they're not swayed by their passions, they're not overcome by worldly temptations, that they are able to see the goodness of God for its own sake and desire it for its own sake. There are 3 reasons to be a hermit.
Okay.
And so as a monk, these are 3 things in which they kind of go through to see, like, is this something that I'm called to do?
Mm-hmm.
And mainly the first one is detachment. Like, are you trying to you know, have you detached from the world? Right? The ascetic's conviction that if they wanted to be perfect, then they must separate themselves from the world as much as possible.
Okay.
The other one is crazy. It's do battle with the devil. They must confront him openly and do so in solitude.
See, that reminds me of the rule of St. Benedict, where he talks about hermits. Mm-hmm. And he says, not all monks are called to this, but only those. I forget exactly how he puts it, but essentially it's what we're talking about. Only those who have achieved perfection, and they go out to do single combat with the devil.
Mm-hmm.
He actually uses the term single combat, which I think is awesome.
And then the third one is like defending supernatural treasures. So supernatural progress requires our battling, constant struggle, and defending the supernatural treasures against the enemy ambushes and attacks. And so basically you're a soldier. We're all soldiers in baptism of Christ, right? And so they say he talks about how there's 2 different types of soldiers in this world, and there's very few of them who are called to actually do battle with the devil, namely mostly these hermits.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are soldiers who are to guard the campground.
You know what we need to bring back? The stylites.
That would be interesting.
Get some people in the middle of the city just standing on a pole for Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Way up high, just on this pillar. I'm just up here.
Just suffering for
I'm
you
just
guys.
I'm just standing on this pole for Jesus.
Yeah. So
I would like to go back in time to just see some of those guys. That would be sweet.
another interesting thing though about hermits is the location. Right? St.
Okay,
Anthony
yeah.
talks about going to the desert.
Uh-huh.
You know, and
But that's because that's where the desert was what he had on hand.
well, it's also where Christ went to battle the devil.
Yeah, that's true.
And he talks about actually St. Cassian and St. Anthony talk about like the territory in the desert. So when we get back, we're going to actually talk
Having
about
like
this.
specific spiritual value. Is that
Yeah.
what you're saying?
Mhm.
Okay. All right.
Was that 3?
That was 3.
Okay.
I also have a lot of questions that I want to save till the end.
Yeah, because like I
know we want to get through this.
Because you can
I know.
sidetrack me, and then I lose my train of thought.
I'm not trying to sidetrack. I'm trying to ask like on-point questions, but
Right.
I do have some.
And I may not have the answers, but
Yes,
that's fine.
well, that's okay.
we can talk through
yeah.
it. Okay, so let me at least get through the desert part, and then we can stop, and you can.
I like this next one because this is biblical.
Yeah.
All right. Welcome back to the Catholic Man Show. I'm David Niles here with Adam Minahan. We're talking about hermits, like the Green Berets of the spiritual world, the Navy SEALs of Jesus.
Yeah, and so before the break, we were talking about how the desert, actual specific territory, is very important.
Okay.
And so,
Not all hermits have been in the desert, but it does seem like you're right that there has been a pride of place almost.
Yeah, so
with the desert.
in imitation of Christ, who went out into the desert for 40 days and was tempted by the devil. Hermits do the same thing, but St. John Cassian talks about in their desire to do battle with the demons openly and directly, they did not fear to go out into the vast solitudes of the desert, but that only he who has attained a certain degree of perfection is called to face the demons in this way, for he is only capable of seeing them in the desert. So they actually talk about in this book how the desert is actually kind of the territory for demons.
So they're like Dog the Bounty Hunter
Going out there.
of heaven.
Yeah. And going out in basically doing battle with the
With their
demons.
gorgeous long blonde hair. Just
If
going
that's
out.
how you want to describe it.
It's
Yeah.
an analogy.
Sure. But I find that very interesting that the place was something,
Yeah.
the geographical place.
That is interesting. And it makes sense. Actually, the more I think about it, it does make sense because the Bible makes specific reference actually to demons wandering through the arid regions. Like when a demon is expelled, he wanders through the desert, and then talks about him like getting more of his buddies and coming back to the possessed person who was recently possessed and finding the house put in order, and then then they all move in. But it does say specifically that the demon wanders through the arid regions.
And how beautiful it is that the warrior of Christ goes out into the enemy's territory, behind enemy lines, to do the battle.
Yeah.
And say, like, no, Christ is sufficient for me.
Yeah.
Well, it's almost
sweet.
like he's battling in there so that he doesn't come to the people. Right? He's fighting him there and keeping him occupied from coming here.
Yeah.
And defending these supernatural graces, these supernatural, gifts that we've been given. And so anyway, as I was reading this book, it talks about how actually that the hermit life is the logical and almost necessary consequence for the Christian life. Not everybody is called to all these things, but the everybody's called to a vocation,
Right,
and so that doesn't mean your vocation is the same as my vocation or Jim's vocation, but all those vocations are needed in the body of Christ, and some are such a high level of a vocation to where their state of perfection is so high, and they see God for really who He truly is.
Sure.
And is no longer caring about the world or himself or the needs of himself, and goes out on behalf of those here on earth to do battle with the devil. So he talks about how it's actually the highest and most perfect form of a monk.
Well, that's what St. Benedict references. That
Yeah, which I thought was really cool to think about. And as I started thinking about it, then I realized, actually it does make sense, right? That it's not that he's going out alone either, because he's reached such a level to where I don't necessarily, I don't need a human friendship, but I have such a relationship with God and this communion of saints.
I actually don't think that the friendships that they had, I don't think that they gave them up at all. I think that they just, how a married couple, you've been married for so long, they don't need to say much to each other. They just they know each other, and they can have this kind of communication without saying anything. I think that in many ways the hermits may have had something like that with each other, where I don't have to see you all the time to like I because our friendship is rooted in Christ,
Right.
and we're both pursuing him so passionately and directly that our friendship stays fresh and renewed all the time.
That's right. I think that's actually that's exactly right.
And so the fraternity remains, even though it takes on obviously a new form.
Mm-hmm. So again, the ways to get there are through prayer, fasting, and reading of Holy Scripture.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the book goes into a lot more about okay, what does that mean for the married man?
Yeah, I have questions about marriage and
Okay.
hermits, if you want to go there, but
well,
whatever you think.
So let's talk about contemplation for just a second,
Okay,
because
yeah.
contemplation is the unity with God, right? So like,
Right.
in order to achieve these type of levels,
The highest goal of all people.
of all people is contemplation. But contemplation is difficult.
Yeah,
Right? There's a saying that an old hermit said, I don't think there's anything harder than prayer. When a man wants to set himself to pray, that is, when the demons, try to prevent it. They know very well that nothing is more of an obstacle to their activities than prayer addressed to God. Every good work, if you practice it perseveringly, leads to rest. Only prayer requires you to struggle to the very last breath.
Dude, that happens to me all the time. When I sit down to pray, I distraction in prayer is something I constantly battle.
Mhm.
I think just about everybody does.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes, when I have like 5 or 6 seconds of like, oh yes, I'm really like thinking and like really communicating with God well, I will have a distraction about how well I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, look, I'm doing good. I haven't been distracted. And all of a sudden that is the distraction. And and I know that's just like the demon assigned to me.
Right.
That's just his tactic he's using at that moment.
Yep.
Or like, oh, well, maybe I should, light the fire before I pray. Or you sit down to pray and all of a sudden you come up with all these other things. Oh, well, if I want to pray well,
Right.
I should probably, do this first. That way I can just really pray, all the time.
Absolutely.
Constantly there's, do anything other than pray.
Right. So I found it interesting that they're talking about like, okay, well, how do I build a life of contemplation? Obviously, the first thing that they talk about is order in life, to set aside the time
Uh-huh.
and make sure and to give it the first of your day.
Yeah.
But it also really leans into the need for manual labor. So he said that human nature needs this occupation to give it a break from time to time from the demands of contemplation, because again, contemplation is difficult. It's not something that you like is easily obtained for long periods of time. So it gives a chance to build itself back up again, to raise oneself towards God in renewed energy. And so this manual labor aids contemplation insofar as it presents this penitential activity, this type of mortification, but then also this realism that happens that unites the body and the soul as a unit.
Almost like you need to pray and work.
Almost like ora et labora.
Almost like that.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds very similar.
But he says, like, obviously we're men that will get tired. Like, we have our stamina is not unlimited. Yeah. And so he says, actually, the Eucharist is this unique relationship with the ascetic life. The Eucharist supplies this necessary strength and union with Jesus and his sacrifices, and wields the ascetic efforts to the Master's universal sacrifice. So it's basically saying like the Eucharist is that which gives us the life and sustains us to keep going, and unites our work obviously with the Master's universal sacrifice, Christ on the cross.
There were hermits in the past who were not priests, who used to come into town or meet a priest somewhat regularly, just to get like a stock of the Eucharist, and that they would take with them back into their cave, so that they could, on a scheduled, regular basis, receive Holy Communion. This is like a long time ago.
Yeah.
I think probably the rules, the regulations
changed.
is
Yeah.
like.
But this is the like the Eucharist is the source and the summit of our faith. It gives us, it's the life within the Eucharistic or within the Christian life, right? it gives us, it unites us truly to our Lord.
Yeah.
And his ultimate sacrifice in conquering death on the cross.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the important part of the story about those hermits taking the Eucharist with them was that they had this recognition that I cannot do this
Right.
without the real presence of Christ in my life.
Right.
You know, I have to have him with me to
Right.
do it.
So what does this mean for married people, right? So this
Yes.
is prayer. Obviously, we're talking about like the importance of contemplation and prayer, but what does it mean for married people? St. John Chrysostom, Juan, you gave us this book a while back on marriage, which is really, really good. It's just a green little, almost like booklet, by St. John Chrysostom on marriage. You can Google that and find it. But he talks about how marriage is not an obstacle to perfection, and that it's not good to think about how, oh, well, I'm not called to this type of life of perfection, which, because we all are called to this life of perfection. And he said, those who live in the world, although they are married, should be just like the monks in every other way, meaning have prayer, mortification, and reading of holy text in their lives. In fact, he even goes so far now. I'm interested to get your take here, okay?
Okay.
Because this is something that some people may not like. But St. John Chrysostom talks about how getting down on your knees to pray and ask God to be merciful in the middle of the night, which is much more efficacious as the father of the household to do so. And he says, you, the man, should act like this, not to leave it to just your wife. That the house ought to continually be an oratory for husband and wife, and that man should have the ultimate sacrifice, the toughest part, and to be getting up in the middle of the night to pray for protection and have mercy on his family.
That would be so tough.
That would be so hard.
But you and I know a guy who
does that.
Who felt the call to do that, and as far as I know, continues to do that.
We're out of time on the Catholic Radio. Go check us out at thecatholicmanshow.com. We're going to continue talking about this and have a few more things about the ascetic life. We're on the Lord's team.
The winning side.
So raise your glass.
And cheers to Jesus. So yes, I do want to talk about marriage here because
let's talk about it.
And not so much from the aspect of contemplation, because obviously, like all married people are called to contemplation. And to that,
all people, you don't even have to have a qualifier on
yeah, all people, no matter who you are, where you are, how old you are, what you're doing. But the idea of like the call to solitude, it seems to stand, like in direct conflict with the very vocation of marriage.
Yeah. So I think that there's some. Okay, so this is going to be. I'm glad this is off the Catholic Radio.
Well, this is one of the. I wanted to wait. I've got some other ones I want to ask you about that.
So this is something that I think. So Saint Augustine talks about how once a married couple like reaches a certain like spiritual level to where they actually don't desire or even really have marital relations because it's kind of a lower good.
Yeah,
it's still a good.
Yeah.
But it's a lower good.
But celibacy is a higher good.
Right, and so.
Because it's a practice of the already but not yet.
Yes. So there are couples who reach a certain stage of perfection within their marriage that they actually don't have marital relations anymore.
Yeah. Many saints, husband and wife saints, chose to do this. It was a practice that was much more common in the Middle Ages, where their children are grown. And they both decide to, like, live a life of solitude, and both join religious orders.
Right, and I think that Aquinas's direction here is very important. That you should not do this without proper training.
Well, and you can't do it without the consent. I mean, if both husband and wife don't equally desire this, you can't do it, because at the end of the day, you can't just you're not unmarried. You will be married, and the marital debt is.
Yeah, so
you have to be cooperating with each other to do that.
Correct. So I think that there's two different solitudes that we could talk about here, right? So one being kind of what you're hinting at is literally a life of solitude.
There's a literal one.
And I think probably the more common one and the one probably more people are called to would be kind of like an analogous solitude, meaning there are certain things in which you give up, for the greater good, and so
like marital relations, that you're talking about.
That being one of them, right? for the greater good of things. So there's more of a solitude there.
Well, it also strikes me that God has ordered the nature of man, where solitude becomes a part of your life, for at least for many people at the end anyway. Like if you're lucky enough to be married for long enough, and you like reach an age of like a specific amount of fullness, marital relations just simply might not be possible for you. Okay. And so in a way, if you see that for the blessing that it is, because God only blesses, sometimes he blesses us with trials because those are the things we need to like reach out to him more fully and more completely. Right. That very well could be what he's doing, is he's kind of instilling a solitude upon you so that you might prepare for him, right? That your love might be more directed at this fullness of age where you now have hopefully wisdom, you have a perspective on life, what it's for, and what its destiny is, right? When you have this old age, that you can now use the life you have left towards its perfection, towards ordering it towards him into this solitude. It seems like God has just simply built that into our nature, that at some point this will happen to us, whether we're widowed or not. It seems inevitable.
Yeah.
So there really is a beauty there. It's not one that's fun to think about, right? And it's not one that it doesn't seem very good on its face. But I think that if we maintain the right perspective, and if we, once again, continue a life of striving for contemplation, that we will find the beauty and the goodness even in that stage, in that season of our life. And it will be a very rich and very fruitful one.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I mean, just like how, hermits, before they even go out, right, they have to reach the state of perfection, right? Which I think we kind of gloss over and just say, oh yeah, well, the state of perfection. Well, I mean, all the saints talk about how like the state of perfection only happens as a slow process, right? The oak tree is not grown over the course of a day. The virtuous life is a slow, mundane almost process at times. And so it's an everyday picking up your cross and carrying it. It's every day of living the virtuous life, of going out and attacking your passions head on, and quieting your appetites so that you can actually hear God in contemplation, right? So this ascetic lifestyle of denying yourself. I was thinking about this the other day as we were, we have this 20 minutes of at least 20 minutes of contemplation during Exodus 90. I was thinking about how I really did not want to take a cold shower that morning, right?
Oh, just that morning, huh?
Yeah, just that one morning. And I was thinking like, I just didn't want to do it. I said, no, I didn't want to do it. I just want to take a shower. And how in my mind, I think like, of course I'd be a martyr. Of course I would say yes.
Oh, right.
Of course I would do this. Like, without a doubt, I would be a martyr. But I can't say yes to like a cold shower that's gonna last like 10 minutes or 5 minutes max.
Yeah, 10 minutes. I was gonna say I have never taken a 10-minute cold shower.
Yeah, I mean, but like I can't say no to this small good.
Yeah.
And I'm expecting that I'm gonna say yes to this great good.
Yeah.
I mean, it just like really hit me, and I know this is most guys have had this feeling, but like it just really hit me in a like strong way about how. In my mind is, of course I would do this.
Right. You think so much of yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have thought about that. Okay, because I think just about every married man thinks, oh, I would die for my wife.
Right.
I would die for my kids. Right. And I think that's probably true. But I don't think it's just as obvious, like, as you sit here in the comfort of, security, because it seems like, oh, of course I would do it. It wouldn't even I wouldn't even have to think about it. Obviously, I'm going to do it. But my question is, okay, you would. Well, do you?
Right.
Do you die for them? Because I think if you don't now, and if you're not willing to do it now, why all of a sudden do you think magically you're just going to be willing to do it then?
Right.
I mean, that just doesn't make sense.
Right.
And maybe you
And
would
that
by
goes
the
for-
grace of God.
And that goes for any.
It goes for anything.
Any
and so
advice that you may be struggling.
the same as
struggling
with martyrdom. Oh, I would die for Christ. Really? Would you?
Right.
Well, do you? Because if you don't die to him now, for him now, in those little ways, then I think that when it comes down to it, you might be ashamed of what like when the moment is, like when the people talk about running into a burning building until you feel the heat on your face. And it's like, now are you, yeah, it's like, oh, now are you going to run into that burning
Right.
building? How many people don't?
Right.
So,
And I mean, we've seen this happen even in this world. I mean, the world has played this out before.
Yeah.
Time and time again, even in recent time periods. But and this is the beauty of the ascetic life, right? Is that it's not a negative, right? The ascetic life is actually a positive one. It's being able to. It's this actual true love. Like a buddy of ours was talking the other day, and we were talking about just some of the trials that we were going through, right? Some of the things that we were going through in life, and we're like, man, this is really hard. And he said, like, I'm really glad we talked about this because I can love you more. I was like, what? I mean, what do you mean? He's like, well, now that I know through your suffering, knowing that you're suffering, I can like pray for you through that specific thing, and I can love you more.
Yeah.
And so it's like through your friendships, through these trials, and you're able to talk about it, it's like, okay, well, sacrifice enables more like true love, right? It enables you to love in a deeper way.
Totally.
To the point of like, the gospel says, no greater love is this to lay down your life for the man of another. So this is the beauty of the ascetic life, is once you actually, it's no longer that when you reach to a certain point, which takes a long time, and I pray that I'm there someday, that it's no longer a fight of saying no, but it's the desire to say yes for a greater good.
Right. I think that's the key is, am I saying no or am I saying yes? Because I'm absolutely still at the point where I'm saying no.
Oh yeah.
And ultimately it comes down to the fact that I have not fully convinced myself of the goods that await me. I either don't have a realization, and this is something like intellectually, yes, I can think about these things, I can understand them, but do I like believe them deep down in my heart or something? I don't know what it is, but I have not fully convinced myself that the goods of heaven are what they are and are so much greater and worth times a billion the very minor things that I have to put up with now. Right? And intellectually, I believe that they are, but I haven't learned that in like my passions, or I don't even know. There's just
the world,
some
the flesh, the devil,
point
like,
of, there's some part of me that hasn't fully bought into this idea, right? I want to ask you about one thing we kind of glossed over.
Okay.
Is, we talked a lot about, once you achieve the state of perfection, there's like a lot there.
Well, that's what I was just talking about.
Yes, but there is a risk even in saying, once you achieve the, for someone, let's say it's like, okay, I think I have achieved the state of perfection.
Yeah, that means you probably haven't.
You know what I mean? Like, it's sort of a catch-22. And so if you think, I have achieved the state of perfection, well, very, very likely, maybe you haven't. And if you haven't, and then you try to go do these things, you will be met with just utter failure, and you will do spiritual harm to yourself.
And others.
And others, yes, that's exactly true. And so I think the one we just said is about, like, am I saying no to things or am I saying yes to things? I think that is a really good litmus test. Yeah. How else? Like, is there another way to know
Yeah, so I think our bishops talked about one time. He said there are two times in a Christian's life: the time that he's at Mass, and the time when he's getting back to Mass.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that is a good litmus test as well. Is like how do you think about prayer? Like, is the manual labor the break in which you need to get back to the state of contemplation, to the state of in prayer? Or is it like, I just got to get like, I checked off that box. Now I can go on with my day.
Mm-hmm.
Are you living your life ceasing without praying?
Yeah.
I think that's a good litmus test as well.
I also think that under no circumstances should anyone attempt to do like, oh, I'm going to go out and live this like solo lifestyle without a spiritual director
Yeah.
telling you.
And I mean,
first.
like, so, I mean, based off of kind of what he was talking about, I do think that there's a need for hermits, and I mean, I think there's even even at Clear Creek, there's a little hermitage, right? And it's not necessarily like for in the monastery, there's like a side hermitage, and I always just kind of laugh about it. It's like, oh, is the cloistered monastery too loud for you that you have to?
Yes, there have been saints who talk about that,
right?
Who'd say, oh, the monastery is just so loud.
Right.
It's just, I just can't even think, can't even pray because it's just so loud. It's like,
right.
Oh, sure.
Right.
I mean, totally, because you heard somebody whispering in the hallway, like
Yeah.
just so disruptive.
Yeah.
Like it's like, you know what? It's a good thing you didn't have kids. I'm just going to say that.
But not every monk at Clear Creek is called to go to that hermitage either.
Right.
And so while I don't think that many are called to this, to this vocation, I do think there is a need for it, especially now with this so much of the secularization of our church today.
Yeah. So I think that there are really two types of hermits that we should distinguish. Okay, I think there's the hermit per se, who is like, we're talking about actual solitude, physical, social solitude.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then there is the like type of hermit which is just hand in hand with contemplation, that we are all called to be hermits in a certain way, right? Where we make that reserve within ourselves, with like that place. And of course, all of us belongs to Christ, and all of it does. But we should have a special like place in our hearts and in our like desires that is for Him alone. Okay, and that's not going to happen on accident.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and we have to pursue. There is a level of interior solitude that every single person should definitely be pursuing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and we have to build that retreat within ourselves, and the only way you're going to do that is by doing the things we've talked about, is having ascetical practices in your life where you say no. Because if you cannot say no and you don't train yourself to say no, then your passions will gobble up every single space in your person, in your desires, in your hearts, right? Mm-hmm. They will consume every available place that you allow them to.
Because your will is weak.
Yes, and it's ravenous. Mm-hmm. Your passions are ravenous. You are hungry because we look around and we see that God made the world good. Mm-hmm. And I want it because He actually made us to be attracted to the good. Mm-hmm. We have this erotic desire in us, which causes us to desire all things that are good. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is the love of Eros, which attracts me to things that are good and beautiful. Mm-hmm. And so if I do not, if I have to kill something, I have to put something on the altar of sacrifice and slay it. And it has to be a part of me. It has to be a part of my desires. Mm-hmm. It has to be my will. Mm-hmm. And this is why it doesn't happen on accident. Mm-hmm. Because I have to intentionally choose to kill something of myself. Something has to die in order for that retreat to be made available, so that the Lord might fill it. Mm-hmm. Because we have our free will, and He, under no circumstances, like He respects and loves our free will, because that is our ability to love so highly that He will never intrude on it, right? And so we need to be specific and intentional. We need to order our lives so that asceticism is simply a part of it all the time. It's not just a Lent thing, right? It needs to be an everyday thing. And so that in many ways that is a hermetic. Is that the word, hermetic? Like a hermit? Yeah, I'm just gonna use that word,
Sure.
hermetic. It's a hermetic way of being that we're all called to, right? And so that'd be more like a pseudo hermitage within ourselves, which is apart from what I would call the hermit per se.
Yeah,
I feel like I'm being very philosophical today.
That's some great distinctions, Dave.
Yes, thank you. Write that down.
Yeah. So I mean, I just think that was like I found it very interesting. I had a much better understanding of what a hermit is and like the need for them and like what it actually, how it's not actually a contradiction to living in communion, but actually a logical conclusion of the fulfillment of living in communion with.
Sure. Isn't that interesting? It's just another one of the like contradictions or the paradoxes in the faith.
Yeah.
That communion leads to solitude.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when done perfectly, that perfect communion leads to a solitude in many ways. It's just like ironic. He's so weird. Like he's
so
great.
awesome.
He's awesome, but like he's weird. Like from a human standpoint, from a human way of thinking, it's totally bizarre.
Yeah.
But incredible, you know. Oh, Adam, if you ever decide to be like a full-blown hermit, can I have your stuff?
Oh, Adam, been meaning to ask you this question. Sure, dude, you can have it all.
Yes.
Except for one thing that one gets to pick.
So he gets to pick one thing.
One thing.
And I get the rest.
Yes.
Deal.
I like this deal.
Juan, if it was today, what would be the one thing that you would pick of all of Adam's stuff?
Which isn't much.
Now, does your stuff, when we say that, does it have to be at your house?
I don't know what you mean by that.
Okay, good. We'll just say yes.
I like his biggest deer head.
You want the deer head?
The biggest
Oh,
one.
you can totally have it.
Yeah.
In fact, Juan, you can have all of the deer heads. That's how generous I am.
I knew he was going to say the wrong answer as he was like looking around in this room, like the things that he was going to like as he's looking around. I was like, oh man, if you're looking for anything in here.
I was just really glad he didn't say your table saw, which is at my house, because I just really want to keep that.
I would have said all of my books. I would have said my books.
You can have the books. You know what? The books, like, I could buy all of your books probably 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 times for what it would cost me to replace that table saw. Okay?
Fair enough.
And I use the table saw all the time.
I can't wait to take it back.
You know what? We're gonna have to work. We'll have to work out something.
Yes, you loading it into my trailer. All right.
Just get out of here.